When I was in 8th grade, every night I listened to Bruce Williams while all of my contemporaries were listening to INXS and Cyndi Lauper. I was listening to Bruce Williams. Bruce Williams, some of you may know, started talk radio. He had the Bruce Williams Show. It was a Monday through Friday, 6 to 9 p.m. weekly dial-in talk radio program. He was a small-town mayor entrepreneur, and he taught you things like what is a FICO score and why to use an attorney at a real estate closing and how to buy a home and how to invest your parents' inheritance to you. Basically a nerd. I was listening to Bruce Williams every Monday through Friday in junior high school and high school for about 7 years. And I learned a massive amount around personal finance and business acumen, and he became the most influential mentor in my life. Never met the man. He died 3 or 4 years ago, not having known that I even was alive. But Bruce Williams was the most profound mentor in my life because he taught me a tremendous amount. I probably graduated high school pretty uncool and uncultured, but I knew a lot about business and personal finance and how to grow a business and how to buy a home and things like that. Bruce Williams, ever heard of him? Bruce Williams, like long before Dave Ramsey, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, any of those, he started as a talk radio host, had a profound influence. The greatest mentor in my life. I think when a lot of us think about mentorship, we think of the CFO on the 8th floor or the person that our company organizes and sets us up with. But I'd encourage you in the next 45 minutes to think about how to redefine mentorship in your life, because I think you can be and receive mentorship from anyone, no matter how well you do or don't know them. My name is Scott Miller, and my 6th book is called The Ultimate Guide to Great Mentorship. It releases on July 11th. But I'll make a deal with you. I have a buy one, get one free offer. All of my books and card decks are in the back there, and they're free, provided you go and buy somebody else's book back on the other book stand. I have no books to sell. So you take one of my books or card decks for free, as many as you'd like, and the lights will be on. It's like kind of like the haunted house in here. John, stay away from the lights. You can take all those books for free back there in the back. Go buy somebody else's book. Fair enough? Great. Okay. We're going to talk about mentorship. About a year ago, HarperCollins came to me and said, hey, Scott, we'd like you to write a book on mentorship. I said, not the book I have in mind. I have 4 more. I'm going, not interested. They said, yeah, but you're kind of the mentor guy. Many of you may know I host the world's largest weekly leadership podcast. It's called On Leadership with Scott Miller, where each week I interview major celebrities and authors and business titans and things like that. And so as a result of that, I wrote a series called Master Mentors. The first 3 books are finished. There's 7 more in the queue. Every year I write a book about my 30 favorite guests on this podcast. Those books are in the back of the room. Feel free to stand up and go grab one whenever you want. And I said, yeah, I'm kind of a mentor guy, but I'm not sure it's a huge passion of mine. Give me a couple of minutes to think about it, like literally minutes. And I came back and said, I think it's a great idea. I'd love to write a book on mentorship, but it's going to be different than the typical books on mentorship that I have found are fairly aspirational. It's a good thing. They're inspiring, but I want to write a very practical book on mentorship because I think, in fact, there are roles that mentors play. And oftentimes they're roles they shouldn't play. Like, if you know me at all and follow me on social media, you know I'm a fairly antagonistic guy in the leadership space. I don't think everyone should be a leader of people. I think that's bunk. I think stop saying that. I don't think everyone should be an anesthesiologist or a commercial airline pilot. And I don't think all of you should be leaders of people. But I'm not even sure I should have been a leader of people. I was a star individual producer. So, of course, as the top salesperson, I became the sales leader and wreaked havoc across the organization. So most of you probably should not be leaders of people. In fact, most of you probably shouldn't be mentors either because we make this mistake that great leaders make great mentors, and that's not true. A lot of the skills that you perfected as a leader are not great with a mentor. Directive, decisive, big visionary, piercing questions. These are not always great things to have as a mentor. So I said to the publisher, I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to identify 15 roles that mentors play. Wrote the book, and the reader team passed out and said, you can't have 15 roles. Scott, you were Stephen Covey's chief marketing officer for 25 years. Does the number 7 not mean anything to you? You maybe can have 8. So I did the publisher a great service, and I took it from 15 down to 13. And that is the booklet you have in your hand. Before we get into the 13 roles, I'm going to talk about 4 of them. Don't worry, not all 13. That would be tough. I'm going to talk about 13 of them. I want you to turn to a partner next to you, and I want you to describe who is the Bruce Williams in your life. Those of you who just joined, I mentioned when I opened, Bruce Williams was my most influential mentor. I never met him. I never saw him. He has no idea I even exist. He has no idea I've actually written my books in tribute to him. Turn to someone next to you and just take 1 minute, each of you. See you in 2 minutes. Who is the Bruce Williams in your life? Okay, come back together. In case you're wondering, no, do not think this is a book. This is called a booklet. This is the book that comes out in paperback, audio, and video on July 11th, but I created this little booklet for you today so you'd have some sense for what these 13 roles are. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to not debrief the conversation. My sense is there wasn't a lack of immediately knowing who your Bruce Williams was. I'll bet for some of you it was your rabbi or your priest, it was your neighbor, your father, your 8th grade orchestra teacher, was your first leader or your third leader. But I don't think we can underemphasize the power of mentorship on people. I've actually become quite passionate about this. I mean, if you think about it, as a mentor, you have the potential to be a transformational figure in someone's life. Absolutely transformational. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read off these 13 roles real quick, and I'm going to take a deeper dive into 4 of them. The first role, if you go to the second or third page here, it is the revealer. You can see me up in the left-hand corner revealing something with my genius paleontologist tools. Number 2, the boundary setter. Number 3, work with me here. Number 3, the absorber. Number 4, the questioner. Number 5, the challenger. Number 6, the validator. 7, the navigator. 8, the visionary. 9, the flagger. 10, the distiller. The activator. The connector. And the closer. In the book, I actually share a 14th rule called the jerk, which is like what not to do. Unfortunately, every podcast interviewer just wants to talk about the jerk. It's like the bonus role. So there's these 13 roles that I think mentors play. Are there more? Probably, but nobody would read the book because it would be too long. So I distilled it down to what I thought were 13 valuable roles for you to know when to employ this role, what the upside was of it, and if you abdicate the role, what the downside is. And throughout the book, I list these skills that I think are natural when you play this role. The idea is not to have a mastery, but a working knowledge of these roles. Now, in many ways, the book will be a parenting book. If you were in the session next door, you know I have no credibility on that, but it's also, I think, a leadership book. But at the end of the day, I wrote this to be a great manual for how to become a great mentor. Let's take some time and go deep on 4 of them. The first one is the revealer. Now, they're not in any particular order. 2 through 12 could be mixed around. 13 is the closer. Makes some sense as the end. The first one is the revealer. The rest of them aren't in any order for any reason. The revealer, I think, has 2 components. When you are mentoring someone, anybody here a formal mentor in any role in your life? You've been designated as a mentor, volunteered, voluntold? Anybody been mentored by someone else? Anybody probably a mentor, but you haven't been formally named that? You're playing that role in people's lives? No doubt. I'm often asked on podcasts about reverse mentorship. And I say, there's no such thing. It's called mentorship. Because I have a bevy of people in my life that are in their teens and their 20s teaching me about Instagram Reels and TikTok and AI, and they're called mentors, regardless of age. Mentorship is arguably one of the most selfless gifts you can give to other people. I'm often asked what's the difference between coaching and mentorship. Nuanced, coaching is usually a profession, credentialized, certified, processed, pedagogy, usually an income. Mentorship really is a gift, is it not? I don't know any people who are paid mentors. They're coaches. No different, no diminishment of that, but mentorship is like a selfless gift you give back to someone. It usually correlates with age and longevity and experience, not always, often. And I think a watch out as you enter the revealer is to make sure, and it's funny, Ron and I, Carucci had lunch today, he mentioned this phrase serendipitously. I think the biggest watch out for mentors is to try to live vicariously through your mentee, like we do as parents. If anybody here follows me on social media, I have 3 sons that are 8, 10, and 12, and they own every color ever produced of every Ralph Lauren short knit shirt ever made. Because in my family, you got to go to Marshall's once a year and buy a shirt for $19, and I spent my entire life building wealth to avenge my mother's miserly ways. Now, she's going to leave it all to me in her estate when she dies. But in the meantime, I decided to live vicariously through my children and buy them every polo shirt I couldn't afford in junior high school. Anybody relate to that at all as a parent? Yeah, we all have some version of that we're doing. Mine's just on Instagram. As a mentor, you have to be thoughtful not to try to live your life vicariously through your mentee, which means the number one rule of mentorship is you can never say, well, if I were you. Never, because you're not them. You don't have their fears and their traumas and their talents and their experience and education. You have different skills. You have a different journey. You have a different set of traumas and passions and fears and skills. So you have to be very thoughtful that as the revealer, you know your number one job is to uncover so that they can discover and name what it is they're trying to accomplish. That's arguably your first goal as a mentor. It's your number one goal. It's your all-consuming goal is to help them name what are they trying to get done. Does that make sense? And it's oftentimes that a mentor will come to you and say, well, I want to be a patent attorney. Really? That's your lifelong goal is to be a patent attorney? Are you sure? Yes, great. It's pretty simple. Let's find the rest of the sessions all about that. But you also have the mentee that comes and says, well, I'm thinking about either being a massage therapist or an orthopedic surgeon. These have very little in common except for the body. Or I want to get a JD or an MBA. And so your job as a mentor is to, as the revealer, the first role, kind of like a paleontologist or an archaeologist. I've never met both, but my sense is when they come into a dig site, they don't helicopter in, dust up a bunch of wind and dust and debris and jackhammer, right? They probably come in fairly lightly. They probably brush away. And as the mentor, your first role is to really help make sure your mentee knows and can articulate what it is they're trying to accomplish. Which is why not all leaders make great mentors, because if you're like me, my job is to get to the root cause, the root purpose, peel the onion as fast as possible, and help to name it, identify success so we can get it done. I'm not a very patient person. Oh, I get shit done. But I'm not a very patient person. As a mentor, I have to exercise sometimes an unnatural level of patience to make sure my mentee comes to their clarity at their own pace. Can you relate to that? Which is why not every great leader makes a great mentor. It requires a different set of skills. Now, you could argue that patience is a leadership skill, but not in public companies for the most part that are being judged by quarterly profits and such. It's an unnatural skill. As the revealer, your job is like the metaphorical paleontologist to brush away, uncover gently, and help your mentee name what it is they're trying to accomplish. It might be they want to open a cupcake company for the weekly farmers market. It might be that they want to go to law school. Maybe they want to become a vice president. They want to have the same journey you had. Number one goal, help them uncover and name what it is they're trying to do. Within the same role as the revealer, I think the only way to do that is to be mindful of your metaphorical footprint. Like metaphorically, you're on the dig site is what they're trying to accomplish, and you're mindful of what your style brings to that conversation. This requires a Herculean level of self-awareness to know what it is like to be mentored by you, what it's like to be on the receiving end of feedback from you, what's it like to be on a Zoom call or at a Starbucks with you, to really understand how do you help your mentee identify and accomplish what they want to do without your personality and dominance confusing them, intimidating them, misdirecting them. Anybody here work for a leader whose style is so prominent and dominant and strong that you find yourself trying to like become them or impress them or be liked by them or model their behavior? I think most people who ever worked for me would say it about me. I'm a fairly loud guy. I'm more charismatic than my wife thinks I am. I'm generally always right. Or I will fatigue you into submission until you realize my genius. This has been my leadership style, and it's worked well for me and not so well for others. I know, right? The insight here is, as a leader, as a mentor, you're only in one business. You're in the relationship business. Because every company is now a technology company. Agreed? Really, whether you're selling lingerie or tulips or software, every company is now a technology company, and every company is in the same business. They're in the people business. And as a mentor and a leader, really your number one job now is to become an expert at relationships. Anybody here an expert at relationships? Exactly, this is an intelligence test. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I masquerade as an extrovert, but I'm a raging introvert. I hate small talk. Like, I would rather wrestle with an alligator than go to a bar on a Friday night at 10 o'clock with music and do fake talk at a table. Now, what did you say? Oh, yeah, that's like my torture is bar small talk. Anybody relate? Raise your hand. Yeah. And my phobias are sharks, snakes, and alligators. And bar small talk. But I recognize that my biggest contribution to my company, to my clients, is my ability to have relationships, to develop them, to build trust, to exhibit trust, to behave myself into a reputation of being trusted by you, by being a better listener, by making and keeping commitments, by being thoughtful around how many ideas I share, which ones I actually execute on. As the revealer, you need to become hyper aware of what it's like to be mentored by you. How you do that is you start asking for feedback. You leave today and go home and ask your spouse, what's it like to be married to me? You go ask your mother-in-law, what's it been like to have me married to your child for the last 15 years? You go ask your boss, what's it like to lead me? You ask your neighbor, what's it been like to have me live next to you, including that orange tree that leans over on your driveway and drops oranges on your new car. Turn to a friend next to you and talk about what's it like to be in a relationship with you. Any kind is fine. This is an intelligence test on your self-awareness. Each of you 1 minute. What's it like to be in a relationship with you? Professional, personal, neighborly, you name it. 1 minute each. If you can hear me, raise your hand. Excellent. Okay, now that we know that self-awareness is a mentoring competency, we also know vulnerability is a mentoring competency. Who would share something about yourself that might be a little bit critical about what it's like to be in a relationship with you? Please, what's your first name?
My name's Maureen.
Maureen, nice and loud. Uncomfortably loud.
I'm very direct.
No problem, keep going. Is that a problem?
Sometimes that's intimidating for people.
Of course it is. Sometimes it can be viewed as probably being rude
Right.
and efficient.
But I do direct kindly.
Oh, you do you? I see. I see. All your directness is shrouded in kindness. Some just have failed yet to see that.
Positive intent.
Yes.
Lead out.
Yes.
Direct.
Yes. So you can be direct as long as your intent is positive, because everyone judges her on her intent, not her technique. Right? Yeah, no one judges you on actually what they hear, what's in your heart. You're delusional. Thank you for being vulnerable. Okay, so if you want a friend that will give you an ego enema, you have one right here. Just judge her by her intent, not by the actual delivery. Who else would show the same level of courage? Thank you. Yes, sir. Nice first name?
Joel.
Nice and loud.
I'm high risk, high reward in my behavior.
Oh.
So I'm always chasing another dream, always chasing another project, and it can be very hard to keep up with me.
Are people dependent upon you for their financial stability?
Oh, yes.
How's that work for them?
So far, it's worked out, but not without the pain of many conversations along the way.
Yes, interventions with your partner or spouse with you.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
We're not in the toilet and broke, but
Yeah, I hear you.
we've been
Some feast or famine.
odds at times of is this the right choice?
Yeah, because it's usually your choice.
Yeah.
And you're convincing your partner or spouse, this is right for us. Do you always win?
Not always.
Thank you for sharing. Two others. Please, back of the room, first name?
Casey,
Nice and loud, Casey.
I can be very impatient with leaders who report for me.
Yeah.
Whereas the guys in our plant, I will give 2,000 chances to. So I can be kind of inconsistent with my standards and expectations.
Do leaders have to treat everyone the same?
Nope.
No. Right. Can you treat people differently and still treat them fairly?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I was validating you. I think it's rule 6. We'll get there in a moment. Please, one more right here. Bonnie, nice and loud.
I have strong opinions, which are my opinions, but also can come across judgmental. So it's something I need to work on when communicating with people and working with people.
There is an art to knowing the difference between your opinions, your experiences, and your emotions and facts. Facts are facts, and your opinions are your opinions, and they're both valuable. But who here is good at conflating and masquerading your opinions as facts? Yeah. Because if I just say it louder with more dominance, you'll realize it's actually a fact, not just my opinion, hun. Yeah, thank you for your vulnerability. This is super aware. This is super important because the more self-aware you are, the more you know, I may need to exercise a level of patience that isn't natural for me right now. My mentee is 24 and she or he hasn't had 4 terminations like I have or been through the grinder like I have. You may have to recognize that your mentee may not accelerate intellectually or mentally as fast as you do to concepts. Anybody here find yourself picking your battles more easily, more judiciously in life the older you become? You pick your battles more wisely? You choose to win the war, not win the battle. Your mentee doesn't always have that life experience, do they? So you may have to be a little more patient to realize they may have to lose a few wars to understand, no, it's or the battle. It's about the war, not the battle. Role 1 is about increasing your self-awareness so that you can reveal with them their goal. Number 2 is the boundary setter. I'm not doing all 13, I'm going to do 4. I'm mindful of the time. Number 2 is the boundary setter. It's a little counterintuitive. If you believe, like I do, that nearly all, if not all, conflict in life comes from mismatched or unfulfilled expectations. That's profound, by the way, because I said it. Nearly all, if not all, conflict in life comes from mismatched or unfulfilled expectations. You thought I was going to do something. I thought you were going to do something. We had to read each other's minds. And therefore, where are the 8 dozen brownies you promised to make for the block party that you've always done and didn't tell me you weren't going to do? You just assumed I assumed. With the boundary setter, this one actually requires you to move outside your comfort zone and discuss the undiscussables. This requires you as the mentor to actually, up front in the conversation, be very clear about what role you do and do not intend to play. I don't recommend it in the opening of the conversation, but first, fortunately, for sure, in the first or second conversation, where you set clear boundaries on what you are and are not going to do, because a lot of mentees will mistake allyship, sponsorship, championship with mentorship, and they have nothing in common. Now, this is my opinion, my book, my opinion. But because you are my mentor does not mean I can expect you to be my ally or my sponsor or my champion or my defender. You're my mentor. Those are different. Now, you might behave yourself into a reputation throughout our conversations where I become your ally or your sponsor, but those are different things. So I think boundary setting is very important up front, and it's not a skill every one of you have. My wife, who is the bomb, avoids conflict like the plague. There's really nothing you could do to get her to have a high courage conversation with you about anything. She would pay money to get out of that. Other talents. Me, she thinks I seek conflict out, which is true. Because I love to wrestle to the ground, and then I think we're going to go have a beer 1 minute later. And she's like, yeah, see you in 3 days. And I'm ready to repair it, like, not even repair it. I'm just ready to move on. I won, you lost, let's go to lunch. She's like, yeah, you won the battle, buddy, not the war. Here's how this might go. Remind me your first name. Sean. Sean, looking forward to this mentorship relationship, mentee relationship over the next couple of months. Very excited about what you and I will learn from each other on this journey. I think it's important that, Sean, however, you and I have a bit of a 3-minute uncomfortable conversation. Meaning, Sean, in 4 minutes, it will be more comfortable. But right now, I think it's important that we set some boundaries for this relationship going forward. So I'd like to clarify what are some of my boundaries, and invite you as the mentee to do the same, Sean. First, I think it's important, like I mentioned earlier, that I don't want either of us to confuse my role as mentor with role as champion, ally, defender, reference. It's not the same. I'm your mentor. So please don't ask me to play that role, because I'm not comfortable doing that. And quite frankly, Sean, I won't be doing that. Secondly, I think it's important you recognize what my skills and talents are. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a mental health counselor. In case we ever get into conversations like that, I'm not comfortable. I'm a leader, I'm a spouse, I'm a father, so I have some experience failing at that. But in the meantime, I'd ask you not place me in that role. And lastly, and perhaps most important to me, you know I'm a somewhat public figure, and I've worked very hard on developing my network across the world, so I would ask that you never even come close to that fence about asking me for a connection or a reference in my network. I'm not comfortable doing that, and I want to make sure that neither you or I ever have to have an embarrassing conversation, because the answer will be no. Now, thank you for listening. I'm sure that you get the point, right? Now, there's lots of inflection and tone and delivery and intent. I don't recommend doing that at the very beginning, but I have no intentions of connecting you with my celebrity network. It's not happening. I was at a university a few weeks ago with an alumni group that was adopting this amongst 1,200 alumni and freshmen. And one of the senior vice presidents of Oracle was on their board. I was giving a presentation starting one of these roles as the connector. And he raised his hand and said, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I just left like a power lunch speed dating in the student union with a bunch of undergraduates, and I made like 7 connections in like 10 minutes. And I said to him, that's your choice, but there is no condition I would ever make a connection to a student I met for 2 minutes with one of my network, because that's my reputation. There's no way. So I think good fences make good neighbors. You have to set boundaries up front. So if your mentee behaves themselves into a reputation of being timely and responsible and delivers on commitments, I might later decide become their biggest champion, their biggest ally, their biggest connector. But you have to earn your way for me to lower that fence. Make sense? This is uncomfortable for a lot of people. But I never get myself in situations that I feel uncomfortable about, because I've very clearly set some boundaries up front. And boundaries is a popular word right now. I used to think people that had boundaries, people that were lazy. You have so many boundaries. I can't call you after 5. I can't text during the weekend. And I've come to learn as I've read more about this, boundaries are like synonymous with mental health and having life balance and helping to minimize or shut conflict down before it rises up. Because I've never met a situation that has to do with conflict that got better as it became less and less resolved. Question?
What are some of the boundaries that your mentees have given you?
Never. They're usually so overwhelmed by my boundaries, they say, no, sir, yes, sir, that's good. I've never had one, quite frankly. So, like I want to hear their boundaries. I didn't say genuineness was one of these. What are you talking about? No, but I would ask that, because you might. You might have some boundaries to say, I can think of lots of them that might not be appropriate to broadcast in here, but you might have lots of boundaries. Can I share one with you? Yes. I own a company. I'm a talent agent. So my real life is I'm a literary, speaking, and talent agent. And a few weeks ago, I was on a call where one of my employees never got these 4 authors on a phone call with the social media agency. And the authors were irritated that the social agency never got their voice right, their voice on social media. And I learned on the call that there had never been a call with the social agency and the authors. And I did this. And a member of my team's father hung himself, and she found him in the garage as a teenager. And she told me a week later, please don't ever do that. I'm not meaning to minimize that. I'm going fast because of our time. But I've thought about it about 4 times a day since then. So I might be more mindful of setting the conditions where my mentee felt comfortable to say what their boundaries might be, because you never know. That's an extreme example, but it's something I've learned a lot about. Being more mindful of what might have been frivolous for me was traumatic for my employee. And she told me that. And by the way, I think she told me that because she felt safe being vulnerable with me. She knew I would not attack her. I wouldn't, dismiss it or deny it. I was horrified, and I validated her, told her I will never do it again, and we moved on. Keep going. 2 more. Number 6 is the validator. We know you can validate someone without agreeing with them. The validator is probably the most judicious of all of these roles. You, as the mentor, do not validate your person for showing up 3 times in a row or for being prepared with their agenda. By the way, it's their agenda, not your agenda. And as the mentor, when you're setting boundaries, you're being very clear on how many topics can we really discuss today in 45 minutes, right? So you're setting some boundaries on ambition and possibility in the meeting. As the validator, I think you have the choice to name and give meaning to people's genius. I am a lifelong stutterer. If you follow me at all on social media or you read my books, you know I've had a debilitating speech impediment all my life. Speech therapy, speech pathology, all through high school, literally from age 3. I've had braces 3 times, Invisalign 3 times, headgear, retainer. I have 2 speech coaches. I have a debilitating stutter. There are about 40 words I cannot say in public. Anybody here have a speech impediment at all? And you know, if anybody here know anybody that's a stutterer. Now stuttering has a whole broad array of reasons, right? There's neurological and sociological and physiological reasons why people stutter. But most stutterers are also big readers because you have to build a massive vocabulary. Because when I know a word's coming up 3 sentences from now I can't say in front of you, I have to have like 15 choices over here that are right at the ready. Does that make sense? So most stutterers have massive vocabularies because you have to have a backup plan for every word you cannot say in public. And my stutter quadruples in the winter because the cold weather exacerbates it. So if you go snow skiing, I am quiet the whole day. My friend base exponentiates in the winter. That's a joke. Because I can't speak in the cold, in public. I'm just quiet the whole day. Here's why I tell you that. I was born and raised in Orlando, Florida. I worked for the Walt Disney Company for 4 years. They invited me to leave, and I moved to Utah, where I've lived for the last 27 years. When I was 17 and a half years old, I was working at a bakery in Orlando, Florida, and a Middle Eastern tourist, she happened to be Israeli, came into the bakery, and she asked me for directions to a location about a mile away. 17 years old, I pass her almond croissant and her peppermint tea, I remember it, almost 40 years later, across the counter. I gave her the directions to the place, I think it was a hair salon about a mile away. And as she walked out of the door, this Israeli woman said to me, and by the way, English was her second language. Most Israelis speak English because they learn it in school. She said to me, quote, "You are a remarkable communicator. You are so well-spoken. You have a great command of your language." And she walked out the door. I was 17 years old. I had a debilitating stutter. What I didn't know was that that day I was going to put that validation in a metaphorical backpack and wear it for like 30 years and pull it out whenever the CEO was kicking my ass, which was a lot. And I went on to host an iHeart radio program, host the largest leadership podcast in the world, and speak for a living now. My point is, I don't think her intent was to validate me. Maybe it was. But the transformative impact that woman had on me was 40 years later. I can still tell you what she ordered. I think when you're the validator, this is a role that you use with great judiciousness, is when you see something that is special in your mentee, whether it's their purpose, whether it's their passion, whether it's their talent or their genius, I think you should name it. Is you should create a pause and say, "James, can we stop for a moment? James, I want to say something to you. I want you just to be quiet for a moment and just absorb it. I don't want you to deflect it or deny it or dispute it or even minimize it. James, I noticed that during our sessions, you have a remarkable ability to synthesize information, take out what's valuable for you, and leave the rest. That is a genius you have that is going to serve you. You get the point, right? I've been very specific. I haven't said, wow, you're so kind. You're direct. No, I actually cited a very specific talent, and I'll bet you he will remember. He'll go home thinking, am I a good synthesizer? How does he know that? I'm not sure. That's a joke. My point is, as a mentor, it isn't a joke if they don't laugh. My wife reminds me. As the mentor, you have the power to validate in someone a genius or a talent that you have no idea the magnanimity of that in their life. The CFO of Franklin Covey, where I was the CMO for a long time. Now, usually CFOs don't like CMOs, right? Because one spends and one saves. And one's always trying to control the other. Always. This was sort of a consummate CFO, sort of, a gentleman in his late 60s that was as conservative as they possibly could come, unimpeachable integrity, super wise, and then there was me who was just like spending like Trump. That's not a political commentary, or somewhat pick your political spender of choice. That's not against Trump. He once walked by me, I'm sorry. He once walked by me and said, Scott, you are a creative genius. And he walked on. Now, secretly, I kind of want to be him, and I think he wants to be me. But that has like been pierced into my psyche for years, that the CFO thinks I'm a creative genius. And it sort of emboldened me to be more responsible with the budget, right? And to make sure that all the efforts of our team really drove the ROI, and he knew about the profitability that came out from all this stuff. And I sort of craved his approval. We were peers, by the way, paid the same, accountable to the same. But just that one like deliberate comment, he wasn't a guy that threw away compliments. I mean, this is, a former accountant from KPMG or whatever, right? Not that accountants can't give compliments. Do they give? I don't know. Do they? The validator, I think, has the powerful role to change someone's life, done with great discretion. One more, and I'll let you go. The flagger is important. I'm not going to talk about it, but the flagger is important. Time out, stop. That feels illegal. Time out, that's not the full story. There has to be more to this. It's not possible. I really feel like maybe you're only providing me the facts as you see them make you look good, which we all do, by the way, not just you. I do it all the time. So let's talk about what the real story is. The flagger takes courage. I want to talk about the one that's just after that, number 11, called the activator. Next to the validator, I'd argue this is the most powerful role because this is the role that I named later in for a reason, because now that you've learned all about their passions and their fears and their joys and their traumas and what they're good at, maybe 1 session or 9 sessions, this is a chance for you as the mentor to say, that's it, I think it's criminology. Yep, you should be raising hybrid roses. I can see it, you light up, it's your joy, it's your passion. This is where you're really sort of lighting their match. It's a lot of responsibility, right? Because you could ignite the wrong thing. I don't know about you, but one of my biggest talents in life is I'm a visionary. Like, I think anyone can do anything. Just because I can speak in front of 10,000 means you can too. An hour's notice, no problem, I'll get you trained. Black diamond on the ski hill, no problem, give me an hour, you'll be up there. And you'll come down on a stretcher, and your evals will suck at the conference. But have you met me before, metaphorically? Like, I can will anyone into confidence that I see in them, and it's often irresponsible. Because as a visionary, you might have all kinds of ideas for your mentee when there's things that you can do and you want to do, but it doesn't match their journey or their skills. You've got to be responsible for how big your vision is. This one is the activator, is to make sure that you're activating what you really fundamentally believe is their path forward. About 5 years ago, I was the CMO of Franklin Covey. I was in my final 2 years in the firm. I departed from the firm 3 years ago. I'm still in good standing. I'm an ambassador for them. And I hired a consultant to come in and think through a book with me. Now, I was the producer-director, so I decided what books the company wrote, who published them, on what topics, and who wrote them, but I was not the actor. I was the producer-director. You never see the producer-director. They make more often than the actors do, but you never see them. They're behind the scenes. My job was to make other people wealthy and famous. That make sense? Honestly, and build a brand. And I hired this consultant to come in to think through this book that I thought the firm should write. And I was pacing around in my office as the CMO, behind the scenes. You couldn't find me on LinkedIn. You couldn't find me in any bookstore. And I'm walking through this book with her, and I have these 3 authors in mind in the company. And after about an hour, this consultant, her name was Lee, she said to me, Scott, she said, why aren't you writing this book? I said, no, 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 no. Too many haters. They'll never pass the board. Not going to happen. That's not my talent. My job is, and I dismissed it. I went back to like the architecture. Here's the chapters, and here's the skills, and here's the things. And about 15 minutes later, she stopped me, and she said, no, I'm serious. This is your book. You need to be the lead author on this book. This is your book. And up until that, I had too many reasons why that wouldn't be possible. Not from a skill standpoint, right? Anybody here can write a book. I've written 6, which means you can write more. If I can write 6, 7. But it was in that moment that Lee was the activator. She really got me thinking about it. And so I kicked off one of the authors. And the book became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. It's back there. Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. Sold 60,000 copies in the first 2 years. And it was all because Lee Stevens saw this sort of passion and genius and articulation in me and gave me the confidence to say, no, you should write this book. Now, it took some political maneuvering, right? I had to get a coalition together and get the haters all on a trip to Hawaii so they couldn't see the emails and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it worked. My point, it's actually very true. It was an expensive political process. My point was, just don't BCs, don't copy them. My point is, as the mentor, you have a massive opportunity to activate someone's genius by saying, you should go do that. Not every day, not every idea, not every conversation, but really thoughtful and careful. I think our time is up. I hope you enjoy the book. I hope you'll buy the book. It's available now in pre-order. I'm around for questions, pushback. I appreciate your time today. All those books, all those card decks, please take them home in exchange for buying someone else's book on the big bookstore. Thanks, everybody.